Hey, good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gadi Schwartz coming to you from Los Angeles. And here's some of the stories we're watching tonight, starting with another indictment to tell you about. Daniel Penny has just been indicted by a grand jury for choking to death Jordan Neely on a New York subway last month. There have been some new developments in the Rust movie shooting. Prosecutors are saying the film's weapons expert was likely hungover when she loaded a real bullet in Alec Baldwin's gun before the deadly shooting. And this is not the start of summer that a lot of us had in mind. Tens of millions of Americans are under severe weather threats tonight, plus the latest on the classified documents case against former President Donald Trump after he was booked and released in federal court.
I had every right to have these documents.
And what happens when someone in the prime of their life is suddenly given a 5% chance of survival and then lives? The answer might not be as simple as you think.
Once you finish the active treatment, the surgeries, the chemo, that's when the hardest part comes. And you have to sit with yourself and you have to sit with your new reality and figure out, what does that look like now?
And we are starting tonight with breaking news out of New York in that case of that deadly subway chokehold that was caught on video. A grand jury has indicted 24-year-old Daniel Penny for the death of subway performer Jordan Neely on May 1st. Now, witnesses say Neely had been acting aggressively with others on the train when Penny, a former Marine, put him in a chokehold. A part of that was caught on tape and has been seen now by millions. And by the time the responders reached Neely, he was unconscious, later pronounced dead at the hospital. The city's medical examiner ruled the manner of death a homicide, and there were protests across New York demanding justice for Neely. Penny was arrested and arraigned earlier in May on a second-degree manslaughter charge. Penny's lawyers issued a statement on the indictment saying that when a trial jury is tasked with weighing the evidence, they will find Daniel Penny's actions on that train were fully justified. We're joined now by criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Bernarda Villalona. Bernarda, we've all seen this video. I imagine so did the grand jury. But what else have they potentially seen here?
Absolutely. So what you're talking about is a grand jury presentation. So the district attorney's office, the prosecutor, presented the video as well as what I assume is a few witnesses. The question is whether Daniel Penny actually testified before the grand jury. In terms of if he didn't testify, the prosecutor, the question will also be what charges did they present and whether they presented the defense of justification of self-defense. And when it comes to self-defense and justification, really the only person that can tell you why they took the actions that they did is Daniel Penny. And I think that may have been lacking in the grand jury presentation, but that was totally up to Daniel Penny whether he wanted to testify before the grand jury. Because either way, a grand jury presentation, you're dealing with a different burden. It's just probable cause to believe that a crime was committed, and Daniel Penny is the person that committed the crime, as opposed to let's wait until the time of trial where you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he did not act in self-defense.
And this past weekend, Penny's legal team released 4 videos of Penny talking about the incident. Here's part of what he said.
I was scared for myself, but I looked around. I saw women and children. He was yelling in their faces, saying these threats. I couldn't just sit still. I didn't see a black man threatening passengers. I saw a man threatening passengers. I knew I had to act, and I acted in a way that would protect the other passengers, protect myself, and protect Mr. Neely.
So regardless of whether the grand jury saw those videos or saw testimony like those videos, that's likely something that's going to play into court, right? Do you think that that's going to have an impact?
It's going to play a huge role at the time of trial. At this point, he's been indicted, so we've moved past that road. So now we just have to wait and see in terms of after the motions are argued, whether the decisions are made by the judge, and at the point of trial when they formally present the defense of self-defense, of justification. As you can see, when we're talking about reasonableness, because that's the question, was it reasonable for Daniel Penny to believe that there was a threat, an imminent threat of deadly physical injury or a physical injury where he had to act, because if he did not, it was a matter of life or death? That's the question for the jury to decide. And if you ask any person, it depends who you ask, It's fact specific. It's up to your background to determine, oh, was it reasonable? We've all ridden the train before. We've all seen a lot of stuff on the train. I've been riding the train since the 1990s. You do see people that have mental issues. You do see people that are upset, that are aggressive. But does that necessarily mean that I have to get up from my chair and all of a sudden just tackle someone and put them in a chokehold? No, there's some things that we're just used to because we're New Yorkers, and you just move on.
And we heard Penny there talking about race. Race has definitely played a role in the protests. Do you think it's going to play a big role in the trial?
Yes. I don't think there's any way around the question of race when it comes to a trial in this case, whether it was intentional, whether it was subconsciously, but I think race is going to play a role in this case. It is emotionally charged. And when we're talking about race, we're talking about when you're selecting a jury, when we're talking about the arguments that are going to be made. That's going to be the thought in the back of people's minds, whether people want to admit it or not. But race will play a role in this trial.
Bernardo Villalona, thanks so much for joining us. And tornadoes and baseball-sized hail are battering the southeast right now. Earlier today, people watched these massive funnel clouds ripping through yards in Alabama, leaving behind a lot of damage. And check this out. A tornado tore off a whole wall off that side of the building with just cubicles left behind. And then there was the massive rock-sized hail coming down in Brooksville, Mississippi today. You can see it bouncing off the wall. Some of that hail measured 5 inches wide. Now imagine that coming down on your car or your house. Meanwhile, storms are brewing in Georgia. Those massive clouds were spotted just a few hours ago in Blakely. NBC's Kathy Park joins us now from Warrior, Alabama. Hey, Kathy, how are things right now where you are?
Gadi, good evening. So the storms have rolled through the area for now, but we are starting to assess the damage. And if you take a look behind me, you'll notice is pretty massive oak tree that split in half, and residents here say that this happened really at the height of the storm, which was early on this afternoon. You can probably see these large limbs behind me. They're really close to the power lines, but fortunately the neighbors here say that the power has stayed on for now. But keep in mind, Gadi, this was round 1 of severe weather. Residents here are on high alert for another round of severe weather later on this evening.
And we're hearing one person might have been hurt. Do you know anything more about that?
Yeah, so we are gathering some information on that right now, about an hour and a half southwest of here in Utah, Alabama. We are hearing that severe storms and a possible tornado touched down in that community and destroyed a home and trapped 3 people inside. Fortunately, 2 people were able to make it out okay, but 1 person was trapped. That woman has been hospitalized. Right now, we don't have an update on her condition. We understand that she was in the hospital earlier today, but of course, things might change later on this evening as more severe weather rolls through, and things could look a lot different tomorrow morning, Gadi.
And it looks like from where you're at right now, things have somewhat dissipated or moved on through. But is it going all night tonight? How long should people be on alert?
I know. When you look at our live shot right now, Gadi, you're like, what severe weather, right? So later on this evening here in Alabama, forecasters are saying that there is a potential for damaging wind gusts, hail, as well as a possibility of tornadoes. And the same goes for other regions in Georgia as well as Texas as well. So we're not out of the woods just yet. So in the next couple of hours, things are likely expected to fire up once again. Gadi?
Kathy Park, thanks so much. And we are also seeing a massive heat wave right now put some stress on Texas and its power grid. And when we say hot, we mean hot. Some places feel like they're anywhere from 100 degrees to 120 degrees. Joining us is NBC meteorologist Bill Cairns. Bill, let's start with those storms. Is this a night to be on alert?
It is for a couple more hours. It's not going to be as bad as it's been during the day today. I'd say maybe we're 3/4 of the way through our severe weather event. So far, 175 severe weather reports, including 7 tornadoes, about 100 high wind reports. Going into today, we were mostly concerned with the damage the winds would do, and we do have over 100,000 people in the region without power because of the damage from these high winds and large hail. Mississippi, by the way, you showed that picture of that 5-inch hailstone. If that's confirmed, that may tie or break the record for the largest hailstone thrown ever in the state of Mississippi. That goes back to 1962 was the previous one that was that size. So very rare event. So we still have severe thunderstorm watches all the way from Dallas to Little Rock. We have a new severe thunderstorm watch from about Daytona Beach to Jacksonville. And we do have an isolated area where we could get an additional tornado or two. In the last half hour, we did hear a report of a tornado just north of Savannah. So this tornado warning goes to areas just north of Hilton Head here. And we will watch maybe about the next half hour or so to see if we get any more reports there. And then tomorrow, severe weather, Mobile to Tallahassee, and also Dallas, Oklahoma City to Kansas. And not as bad as today, Gadi, but kind of rare in middle of June to be dealing with this much severe weather.
And Bill, talking about Texas, I mean, when is all the heat in Texas going to end?
Not soon enough for everyone that lives there. I mean, it's like July and August already in many areas. So the hottest I saw today was Falcon Lake, which is located here somewhere near Laredo. It was 120 heat index. Temperature was 107. The dew point was 73. And that's just both gross, and dangerous. So it still feels, even at this hour, like 110 in Laredo. Corpus Christi, it still feels like 104. Brownsville, 109. It's not going to cool off a ton tonight. And then you get day after day of this. And that's why we have heat advisories that are widespread here throughout the region, all the way through southern Louisiana, and even a few in South Florida, by the way. So tomorrow, how hot will it be? This is just the temperature, not with the humidity added in. So hundreds up to Waco, about 109 in Laredo, Del Rio, about 105. You get the idea. And unfortunately, Gadi, this is going to linger all the way into Father's Day. 101 in Waco. Look at San Antonio, near 101 through Father's Day. Del Rio, 106. No signs of this letting up.
So anywhere from feels like 100 to 115, 120, that is wild. Bill, before you go, Minneapolis, they posted their worst air quality ever because of the smoke from those Canadian wildfires, right? So where is that smoke headed next?
The endless story that's going to go with us right through this summer. The fires are still going. They're still burning strong. And once the wind direction shifts and heads south, it's heading our way. And right now we're at 243 air quality index. That is in the purple zone. That is very unhealthy for everyone. They've canceled all evening events in the area because of this smoke. So now everyone wants to know, well, where is it headed? Tomorrow at about 3 p.m., not as dense as over Minneapolis right now, but look at over Chicago and heading towards Detroit, once again through the Ohio Valley. And then as we head into Friday, some of this blows into D.C. and towards New York again. It won't be as bad, Gadi, as last week, but get used to it. This summer, we're going to be talking about smoke a lot.
Bill, thanks so much. And it seems like there is yet another twist in that deadly shooting on the movie Rust. Prosecutors are now saying the armor who loaded the gun might have been hung over. Now, we've seen a lot of back and forth between prosecutors, Alec Baldwin, and the armorer, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed. And remember, prosecutors dropped the charges against Baldwin, but they now seem to be doubling down on Gutierrez-Reed. NBC's Aaron McLaughlin joins us now. Aaron, this is interesting that this is all now coming to light. Are they saying that Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was out partying the night before, or what are they arguing here?
Well, they're basing this argument on witness accounts who say they saw Gutierrez-Reed drinking heavily during the evenings and smoking weed. Now, wording matters here, Gadi. They say it's likely that she was hungover when she loaded the weapon with a bullet. They don't know for sure. In these documents filed by the prosecutor, they're also outlining her conduct after the shooting, saying that after the shooting, she took the weapon, unloaded it, gave at least one of the bullets to at least one person, and then walked off with the weapon for a considerable amount of time. Prosecutors noting that they have not charged her with tampering with evidence, although the investigation is ongoing.
And this is a case where we saw the charges against Alec Baldwin dropped. Is there any possibility that he could be recharged here?
Yeah, there is a possibility that he could be recharged. The prosecutor saying that they have sent the weapon in question and the sear, it actually broke during the course of the investigation, to an independent expert. If that expert determines that it had been misfired in some way, then it's possible that they will refile charges against Alec Baldwin. Although they say that they have 60 days to make that determination. I also should point out that Hannah Gutierrez-Reed, in terms of these latest allegations, is pushing back fiercely, saying that her charges should be dropped. Her attorney doubling down on that today, saying, quote, the prosecution has so mishandled this case and the case is so weak that they are now resorting to character assassination tactics to further taint the press and jury pool.
Not the last we've heard of on this case.
No.
Erin, thanks so much. We've got much more ahead, including how much we should all shell out or be shelling out at the grocery store these days, with some now saying the prices are finally going down. I don't know. I have not noticed that. And not everyone's buying it.
I believe it when I see it.
You don't feel it yet?
No, I don't see it either.
Hey there, welcome back. And here's some of the other headlines we're watching tonight. Demolition continues on that collapsed part of I-95 in Philadelphia. And once that's done, the plan is to fill in the gap to make a temporary road until they can rebuild the overpass. The first loads of backfill should get there tomorrow. And UPS and the union that reps its workers just struck a deal over heat safety measures in delivery trucks. And it means that all new small package delivery vehicles will now have air conditioning. And a judge has temporarily blocked Microsoft's $69 billion deal to buy Activision Blizzard. Regulators in both the U.S. and U.K. argue it could be bad for competition in the video game market. Now, Activision Blizzard is behind games like Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, and Candy Crush. And it looks like America might have a new beer of choice. In May, Modelo knocked Bud Light from the top spot for the first time in more than 2 decades. Bud Light sales have fallen almost 25% since a year ago. That's been dealing with boycotts lately after striking a partnership with trans activist Dylan Mulvaney. And the Vegas Golden Knights are Stanley Cup champs. Last night in Game 5, they absolutely dominated the Florida Panthers 9-3. That is the team's first championship win. And get this, the team has only been in the NHL for just 6 seasons. Congratulations. And former President Trump has now been indicted and arraigned in 2 separate cases spanning from Florida to New York. In New York, he's facing those 34 felony counts related to falsified business records, hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels. And in Florida, the charges are federal. They're brought forward by the Department of Justice itself, 37 in total, including some related to the Espionage Act, all going back to those classified documents found at Mar-a-Lago. And mind you, Trump's legal troubles don't end here. Other investigations into conduct are still open, one related to election interference in Georgia and another related to those January 6th riots. So where do his legal troubles begin? Where do they end? Let's bring in senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett. Hey there, Laura. There are some reports that there are some Republican operatives that have been discussing the possibility of Trump going to jail here, whether in New York or in Florida. So got to ask, how real is the potential for jail time here?
The reason they're discussing that, Gadi, is because what he's been accused of involves serious penalties. The obstruction of justice alone is talking about 20-something years in prison, but we are a ways off from that. And so I think folks should realize how sort of slow this process could go. We're only at the very beginning stages of this. Obviously, he's going to try to file a bunch of motions to get the whole case thrown out in Florida and New York, most likely. And so even if the actual charges carry a lot of prison time, we're just really far away from that. And so I think we have to at least get to a trial first before we can talk about a conviction and sentencing.
I mean, I think you touched on what a lot of other people are wondering, and that is the slow process of justice. You start to look at some of the timelines here. The Stormy Daniels stuff, that dates back to like 2016. This latest classified documents case, that's relatively recent, and it seems like things have moved somewhat fast there. And then there are those 2 other potential investigations. Why are those taking a little bit longer here?
Yeah, I think it's confusing. There's so many different things to keep track of here. But you are starting to now see the timeline sort of condense, and it does feel as if they're all sort of coming together at once. And of course, some of them all sort of relate to the same sort of operative facts, right? The ones having to do with what happened in the 2020 election, it makes sense that those would all be on the same track. As for the hush money case, exactly how that's come to be right now is actually a great question, and it's something of a mystery about why the DA would bring that now. As it relates to the Georgia investigation, just tonight we got a statement from the Fulton County DA's office saying, yeah, I recognize that the federal case is ongoing, but that's not going to make any difference in my state probe. Obviously, you have state probes, you have federal probes. They might overlap in some way, but they also might not be coordinated. And, oh, by the way, of course, there's a presidential campaign happening here. And at least in the Manhattan hush money case, that's scheduled to go to trial in March of 2024, right in the thick of the primary season. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the judges take that into account. How do they take somebody off of the campaign trail who's the front runner for the Republican Party, but if he's standing trial and he's supposed to be there every day? These are just considerations we've never had to face before.
Going to be a very, very busy year and a half, Laura Jarrett. Thanks so much for joining us.
Anytime.
And for those borrowing money from the bank for credit cards or mortgages, there is some relief today. The Fed paused what would have been the 11th consecutive interest rate hike. But while they've held off this month, the Fed did warn 2 more are coming this year. They're just taking time to measure the impact of the previous 10.
We have raised our policy interest rate by 5 percentage points. Today, we decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged. Looking ahead, nearly all committee participants view it as likely that some further rate increases will be appropriate this year to bring inflation down to 2%.
And right now, inflation is at 4%, which is lower than last month and the lowest it's been since March of 2021. But it is still far from that 2% level that the Fed is trying to get us to. Now, prices are starting to drop somewhat. For example, the price of eggs, a dozen eggs are now about $2.67 on average. Just last month, that number was over $3. So, yeah, progress is being made slowly because overall the cost of food and groceries is still on the rise. That cooling down is not necessarily translating over to the average American when you go to the grocery store. So joining us now is a correspondent, Shaq Brewster, who is either grocery shopping or talking to grocers or talking to people getting their groceries or all of the above. Shaq, yeah, I know you've been in grocery stores all day talking to people about what they're feeling when they go to that checkout line. What's the outlook looking like today?
Well, Gadi, look, there's somewhat of a gap because when we heard that inflation report yesterday, when we saw that headline that inflation is at its lowest since March of 2021, there was some fanfare. People were celebrating that almost. But when you talk to shoppers, they're not quite feeling it just yet. And that's because while we're talking about inflation, we're still talking about a rise in prices overall. You look at food, it's still going up. If you look compared to a year ago, it's still up 6.7%. So when you talk to shoppers, there's a little bit of a gap there than when you compare it to what you see from the headlines. Listen to some of those conversations I had today.
Just now, a slab of ribs, $30-something when you used to could get it for like $24. That's a big jump.
So when we see these government numbers, when the government comes out and says, oh, inflation is slowing, what are you thinking?
I believe it when I see it.
What you could take $200 and get now, it takes almost $400 when you're shopping. So I buy less, make do with less, or buy in bulk.
So there's some hope there. Things are not as bad as it was maybe a year ago for them when they see the sticker shock, but they're still not seeing what they saw before and what they saw before these prices really started to increase. And that kind of explains that discrepancy between the celebration with the national headline and how folks are feeling here on the ground.
That woman described it perfectly. I'll believe it when I see it. So I guess looking at those headlines on paper, everything looks good. No interest rate hike this time. Inflation, they say, is starting to cool. Prices, they say, are going to eventually drop. But not all costs are dropping, right? Can you talk to us about what price tags may be going up and what business owners are starting to say about all this?
Yeah. And yeah, let's stick with food for a second because a lot of this depends on what you put in your shopping cart. For example, I have a sweet tooth, so when I'm putting cake and donuts in my shopping cart, that has gone up about 10% year over year. When you look at things like bacon, when you look at eggs, when you look at the cost of milk, those prices have come down when you look at it year over year. So a lot of it depends on the exact product that you're purchasing. And then there's actually gears outside or prices outside of just grocery stores. We know gas has gone down, but housing has largely gone up. So you have that variety in the economy overall trending in the right direction, but particular prices are still not quite there yet, Gadi.
We're going to have to send you a cake after this, Shaq. Thanks so much, brother.
You got it.
And coming up, a reverse boycott. Oakland athletic fans are taking a unique strategy as the team looks to move to Vegas. We're going to explain that. But first, you got to see this. New body cam footage shows an incredible underwater rescue. 2 cops in Utah race to the scene of a sinking car. Now, they dive into this water that you see to save a 12-year-old girl. They actually shoot a window to free her. They managed to pull her out unconscious but alive, and police say she is recovering in the hospital and is expected to be okay. We'll be right back. Hey there, welcome back. Let's get you caught up in 30 seconds. Daniel Penny, the man that put Jordan Neely in a fatal chokehold on the New York City subway, was just indicted by a grand jury there. The 24-year-old Marine veteran is facing a second-degree manslaughter charge. And the South is seeing some severe weather tonight. Tornadoes and hail already hit parts of Alabama. More than 20 million people are in the path of storms throughout the South. And prosecutors say the weapons expert on the Rust movie set was likely hungover. Hannah Gutierrez-Reed was the one who loaded the gun Alec Baldwin used on that set that killed the film cinematographer. A claim her lawyers are denying, saying the prosecutors have mishandled that case. And shopping malls. I can't imagine high school without them, but the American shopping mall is slowly becoming a thing of the past. And this week came signs that a major mall in San Francisco might be next. On Monday, the owner of the Westfield Mall in downtown San Francisco said they're walking away from the property, and the mall had been struggling to get back on its feet since after the pandemic. But this latest announcement is devastating the local economy there as more retailers flee the area. And NBC's Miguel Almaguer explains.
Once a crown jewel for retail shopping, tonight the Westfield San Francisco Center is pulling the plug on its famed downtown mall. The stunning decision to walk away comes as the city struggles with homelessness, an open-air drug market, and the perception of crime. In a statement, Westfield says, given the challenging operating conditions in downtown San Francisco, which have led to declines in sales, occupancy, and foot traffic, we have made the difficult decision to transfer management.
I don't come to San Francisco anymore, let's put it that way. It's scary.
As other cities like Chicago and Portland deal with major retail closures, the mall's demise in San Francisco comes just weeks after Nordstrom announced its exit from the city center. With nearly half of the stores set to soon be vacant, the future of those still operating is unclear as the nearby Gap shutters and Old Navy plans to soon close. Westfield says sales in San Francisco have dropped 35% since 2019, while their mall in neighboring San Jose saw sales increase 66%. City officials say remote work and a decline in tourism have changed the dynamic here. And while statistics show robberies have increased so far this year, other serious crimes are flat or down.
Though recent crime numbers here are mixed, the image of San Francisco has changed, especially as the city deals with the lack of police officers.
Right now, San Francisco is dealing with a level of drug addiction and drug-driven retail theft and problems with street conditions, and we've got to get our arms around that.
Tonight, the retail decline of a major American city as San Francisco pays the price for its struggle over the city's identity. Miguel Almaguer, NBC News, San Francisco.
And tonight in Las Vegas, Nevada, a deal to build a new baseball stadium to bring over the Oakland A's is getting closer to reality. And for fans in Oakland, where the team has been based for 5 decades, that is devastating. So all season, they've been protesting, boycotting games, and sending the A's attendance plummeting. But for one night, a passionate group of A's fans wanted to show they still care. So they planned a different kind of boycott. And NBC's Jake Ward has more.
It's Tuesday night, usually a slow day for baseball, especially in Oakland. But something strange is going on. The deafening chants of 28,000 fans fill the Oakland Coliseum. all to see a last-place team. Why? Well, because the owners of the A's want to leave Oakland, announcing they plan to abandon the city after 55 years for Las Vegas. The team says they're losing money because fans don't show up. Fans say they're not the problem. The team's doubled ticket prices and traded away beloved players. So they've organized something unusual, a reverse boycott.
Why show up in big numbers when they've done so little for you?
It's just a reminder of, like, how it used to be, you know. So we've been here, we continue to be here. It's just that we're just trying to create a playoff vibe, and anytime that Coliseum is packed, it rumbles like no other stadium in the world.
When high school baseball coach Stu Clary was 10 years old, the A's were World Series champions, sure, but they were irresistible for other reasons.
They dressed in green and gold while everyone else wore white and gray. They had mustaches when everyone else was clean shaven. There was stories of them fighting each other in the clubhouse.
Then there's the ballpark. A new analysis by a sports betting website shows baseball fans consider the Oakland Coliseum the worst in baseball. But years of negotiating with the city for a new site have failed. Oakland's mayor says in the future, no city will be able to afford the old way of attracting a sports team.
At the end of the day, you know, we have to come together and have true partnership. These stadiums cannot be financially backed 100%, 120% by cities. It can't work that way anymore.
She's referring to the $380 million in taxpayer money that Nevada could give the A's. Mayor Tao says she can't see the logic of it.
The A's had proposed a 55-acre ballpark with thousands of units of housing, retail, and restaurants. And we were very close to that deal, and I believe we can get there in short order. And in Las Vegas, they're only proposing a ballpark, just 9 acres for the stadium and no additional development. If that's what they need in Oakland, we can make that work too, of course.
Neither the A's nor Major League Baseball responded to our request for comment. But what is the business case for this move? There's no guarantee fans will come. Just look at the last team to move to Vegas.
The Raiders, we saw that they regressed from a couple of good years, and now they're middle of the pack as well.
And Oakland is the 10th largest media market in the nation. Las Vegas is 40th. But here's one potential factor: gambling.
Maybe baseball feels like it wants to be close to one of its largest sponsors in MGM.
The reverse boycotters hope this display of fan loyalty will catch the attention of Major League Baseball and convince them to reject a move. Because if old-fashioned fan loyalty isn't enough to keep a team in town, organizers say, no team is safe.
If it can happen to the Oakland A's, the historic Oakland A's, charter member of the American League, 9-time World Series champions, home of countless baseball icons like Reggie Jackson and Rickey Henderson, then it can happen to any other team.
Jake Ward, NBC News.
Man, times have changed. Meanwhile, people have been moving to Florida in droves since the pandemic, and that's part of the reasons why some home buyers are paying more than their homes are actually worth. And they're also seem to be paying more for home insurance, which is rising faster than anywhere else in the country. And NBC's Sanika Dangi from our NBC affiliate in Orlando has a story.
When Brittany Huey and her husband sold their Florida home 2 years ago and put all their stuff in storage, they thought it would be temporary. The family of 3 moved in with Brittany's mother, hoping to save for a bigger house.
We wanted to sell, take advantage of the equity that had grown in the house over the time that we had owned it.
They hope to move out in 2 months, looking for a 4-bedroom, 2-bath home in the $350,000 to $400,000 range before reality hit.
Our ultimate goal was to find that upgraded home that allowed us to grow our family, and the increases in rates and having to account for homeowners insurance and so forth, we've really had to scale that back.
In the aftermath of destructive hurricanes, the cost of home insurance in Florida has increased 100% since 2020.
It really is putting a crunch on what buyers can afford to buy, where they can afford to buy, or even for some of our sellers, they're looking at leaving the state to find something more affordable.
The insurance industry says it's not just the weather, but that fraud and litigation are why home insurance premiums have skyrocketed in Florida. According to the state's Office of Insurance Regulation, while Florida accounts for 9% of homeowner insurance claims in the U.S., it also accounts for 79% of all property claim lawsuits.
The struggling insurance market here in Florida has been burdened with litigation issues for years. Homeowners here are paying the highest premiums in the country. And as hurricanes grow stronger and more costly, the crisis is reaching a breaking point.
Is the insurance market in Florida right now working the way it is?
It's not at peak efficiency right now. I think it's been hobbled by the number of storms that have hit. I think it's been hobbled by the legal environment.
Florida recently passed legislation to address the crisis, but
none of it is a magic wand, unfortunately, that's just going to heal Florida's home insurance market right now. This is going to take a couple of years.
Since the start of last year, more than 20 home insurance companies in Florida have either stopped writing new policies or gone out of business. And it's not just Florida. State Farm and Allstate have stopped offering new homeowner insurance policies in California. Colorado, Louisiana are also seeing insurers stop business. Meanwhile, Florida home buyers like Brittany are left in limbo.
Having to put things on hold is very difficult. Where do we get the break? There's got to be a give at some point.
A temporary housing situation now feeling more permanent, with the home of their dreams on hold. For NBC News, Sonica Donge, Orlando, Florida.
And you might have seen those videos of people ringing the bell at hospitals when they finish their cancer treatment, right? But what happens next? Dr. Akshay Sayal gives us a closer look at the difficult journey a lot of those patients are still on.
Once you finish the active treatment, the surgeries, the chemo, that's when the hardest part comes. And you have to sit with yourself and you have to sit with your new reality and figure out, what does that look like now?
And around the world tonight starts in Milan, where Italy says goodbye to its longest-serving prime minister. Today, thousands gathered to mourn Silvio Berlusconi, who will go down as one of Italy's most influential figures. Berlusconi died Monday in a hospital where he was being treated for leukemia. He was 86 years old. And now to the North Arabian Sea, where tomorrow a cyclone is expected to make landfall on the coast near the border of India and Pakistan. Tens of thousands of people have already been evacuated. Up to a foot of rain is expected in some parts, and river and coastal flooding is a major concern. And nearly 80 people are dead after a fishing boat carrying migrants capsized and sank off the coast of Greece today. Greek authorities say the boat had left Libya and was on its way to Italy. They also say it's the deadliest shipwreck off the Greek coast so far this year. And finally, another rare orca encounter, this one off the coast of Gibraltar. The crew on board this catamaran recorded a pod of killer whales pushing them around for almost an hour and then even ripping off their rudders.
Arrancó el segundo. We lost both rudders.
Wild. The orcas caused enough damage to force the crew to be towed to a nearby marina. And now for that miraculous story out of the Amazon that we have all been following so closely. We are getting new details about how 4 children survived that deadly plane crash without any real injuries. And for the first time, we are learning more about the pilot's dramatic calls for Mayday. Kelly Kobiea reports.
It's been called a miracle. 4 siblings between the ages of 1 and 13 found alive after 40 days alone in the Amazon jungle, surviving a plane crash that killed their mother and 2 others. I always had faith, their father said. A preliminary report issued by Colombian authorities and obtained by NBC News says the single-engine Cessna they were in was airworthy. But it says the pilot radioed a mayday twice because of engine trouble, 35 minutes into the flight, and again 26 minutes later, calling, "Mayday, mayday, mayday, the engine is failing again, going to look for a river." The report, written before the children were found, says the aircraft crashed nose first into the jungle floor. These photos showing where investigators believe the children were sitting, in the back, avoiding the worst of the impact. But the report says they only presumed the youngest sibling, now 1 year old, may have been seated with her mother. The family says their mother died at the scene 4 days later. That report also noting the Cessna was involved in an earlier crash in 2021 due to loss of engine power, but was repaired and in the air again this past March. Incredibly, rescuers say the children had no serious injuries from the plane crash. Tonight, the siblings are still hospitalized and slowly getting stronger. Kelly Kobiea, NBC News.
Incredible. And this next story is really one to think about. When it comes to cancer and those lucky enough to go into remission, things are not as straightforward as you might think. So many people see a cancer survivor and they immediately think, wow, you beat cancer. How incredible. Thank God it's over. But what we often forget is that in some ways, beating cancer is just the beginning in relearning how to live life, especially when you have to confront that terrifying fear that it could come back at any moment. And NBC's medical fellow, Dr. Akshay Syal, has this story.
Gwen Schmidt was only 21 years old when she was diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer. Her chance of survival, just 5%.
I was scared, completely terrified. I mean, it was like everything that I'd known up until that point was just gone almost in an instant.
She beat the odds and survived, but then her toughest battle yet.
People think that once you finish treatment, you're done, you're good, you're golden. And I will say that once you finish the active treatment, the surgeries, the chemo, that's when the hardest part comes. And you have to sit with yourself and you have to sit with your new reality and figure out, what does that look like now?
Gwen was left with devastating physical and emotional side effects from not just her cancer, but its toxic treatment. Globally, more than 1 million people ages 15 to 39 are diagnosed with cancer each year. And thanks to better treatments, survival rates keep improving. But that also means more young people are now dealing with the aftermath of the disease. Dr. Stacy Sanford is co-director of Northwestern Medicine's Adolescent and Young Adult Cancer Program, one of a growing group of programs created to help these young survivors.
They might be at risk of cardiac concerns or pulmonary concerns, or maybe even at risk for secondary cancers as a result of their treatment.
One study found that young adult cancer survivors have a higher risk of 24 health problems, including heart failure, kidney and liver disease, hearing loss, and even stroke. They're also more likely to have psychological distress than older adults diagnosed with cancer.
I couldn't look too far into the future because I didn't know what the future was going to be, if it was going to be.
While a main focus of the program is helping patients with health problems that can be missed at regular doctor's visits, they also help with social impacts, everything from school to careers and even love.
If I'm dating, how do I disclose this huge thing that happened to me?
For Gwen, she needed help navigating how to have a child since her treatments destroyed her fertility.
And it wasn't until after so many surgeries that I realized I wouldn't be able to carry a child either.
With aid and support from the experts at Northwestern's program, Gwen and husband Noah were able to use surrogacy to have a baby girl, Vivian.
You're finally in a room with a bunch of people who just get it. They understand the feelings, the fears, just the crazy roller coaster cycle that it is to be diagnosed as a young adult.
Now, finally winning her decades-long fight.
Did you ever think you'd be here?
No. I honestly didn't. I did not think I would be alive long enough to get married and start a family.
And with us now is Dr. Akshay Syal. Dr. Syal, such a striking contrast of two intense feelings at once. You've got relief on one hand, you've got fear on the other hand. I can't imagine what that's like, especially for people who are just starting their adult lives there. I know you've found a few young adult cancer programs around the country. What are they telling you about that internal struggle?
Yeah, Gadi. I mean, this is a problem. I mean, these are people our age, in that 15 to 39-year-old age group who are having their lives on hold. I mean, these are people who should be out dating, starting schools, entering the workforce, and all of a sudden they're left to confront this battle. And as people often say, you beat cancer, now what? And it's a greater focus on that what, especially for the young adults. And how do they, we want them to have many more decades to live. And how do we keep doing that? By managing them, by surveilling them, and making sure that they're getting regular screenings. And it's really a different set of advice for these young adults as it is for somebody who's diagnosed at maybe 65 or even somebody who's diagnosed at age 8. So it's a really separate set of issue here, Gadi.
And we heard a little bit of this in that piece, this feeling of loneliness, and then finally this feeling of relief when you can talk to other people that know what you're going through. Can you tell us a little bit about that part of recovery?
Yeah, so, in talking to Gwen about this, it's you're going to the appointments and you're sitting in the waiting room, and who do you see around you in the waiting room? Do you want to see somebody who looks like your grandfather, or do you want to see somebody who looks like you? And it's really building this sense of community for young adults. A lot of programs, it's Northwestern, it's Stanford, it's Mass General in Boston, are using these Instagram accounts, these Twitter accounts, these Facebook accounts to kind of help build this support for young adults, to make them feel like you're not alone. There are other people who are going through this. You got this. We're here to help you. We're here for anything you need. And you see it really make a difference in these patients, Gadi.
Yeah, and you want to see more people cured of cancer, but you always want to remember that the job is not done once cancer goes into remission or goes away. Dr. Sayal, thank you so much for such an important reminder.
Anytime.
Breaking news this hour here in Los Angeles. A bus of migrants from Texas has arrived at a church here in L.A. Officials are telling our affiliate KNBC that migrants are being helped out by St. Anthony's Croatian Catholic Church. Now, they first arrived at L.A.'s Union Station before being taken in by the church. And we first got word of their arrival tonight from Texas Governor Greg Abbott. He tweeted out in part, Los Angeles is a major city that migrants seek to go to, particularly now that its city leaders approved its self-declared sanctuary city status. Of course, we're going to continue to monitor this story and bring you updates here on NBC News Now. And before we go, it is time for the future of everything. The EU is looking to crack down on artificial intelligence. So is the United States going to be next? Stay tuned for the answer. And now for the future of everything and big news out of Europe. There are now new guidelines from the EU on artificial intelligence, and it's a move that's being watched by policymakers around the world. NBC's Gabe Gutierrez has more.
They are the first major steps to rein in artificial intelligence.
It is adopted. Congratulations.
The European Union's parliament today passing a draft law restricting AI, limiting the use of facial recognition software, and requiring AI companies to disclose more about the data behind their programs.
I think we have made history today.
With Paul McCartney now saying that AI has helped finish a new Beatles song using John Lennon's voice, and Google opposing a centralized U.S. government agency to regulate AI, the global debate over the technology is exploding.
For the first time, really maybe ever, we're asking these tech companies to open up their black box and tell us how these systems work.
I received a call
on Capitol Hill. Jennifer DeStefano from Arizona telling lawmakers of a harrowing story when she got a mysterious phone call in April.
It was Brianna sobbing and crying, saying, "Mom."
DeStefano says someone on the line demanded $1 million for the safe return of her 15-year-old daughter, Brianna.
Brianna continued with, "Mom, I messed up," crying and sobbing continually. "Mom, these bad men have me. Help me, help me, help me."
Turns out it wasn't really Brianna, who was safe on a ski trip. Her voice had been manipulated by AI, DeStefano says, using a handful of online interviews Brianna had done.
If left uncontrolled, unregulated, and we're left unprotected without consequence, it will rewrite our understanding and perception of what is and what is not truth.
DeStefano is now warning parents across the country of how easily scammers using AI can replicate a loved one's voice. Back to you.
Alarming. Gabe Gutierrez reporting there. And today, a controversial move from the Southern Baptist Convention is sending shockwaves across the Baptist community. The Southern Baptist Convention has voted to basically kick 2 churches out of its denomination because they're led by women. And the vote was not even close, as more than 10,000 members voted by a 9-to-1 margin to expel those churches. Joining us now is NBC's Aaron Gilchrist. Aaron, can you bring us up to speed on this?
Yeah, so Gadi, the SBC just wrapped up its annual meeting today in New Orleans, and you mentioned those 2 churches were there appealing a decision from February that essentially kicked them out of the Southern Baptist Convention because they have women pastors. Fern Creek Baptist of Louisville and Saddleback Church of Southern California tried their best to make their cases at the meeting yesterday. Saddleback is that megachurch founded by Rick Warren, recently elevated 3 women to pastor roles. The lead pastor is still a man there, though. Fern Creek has had a female pastor for about 30 years now. Still, the churches were voted out by the delegates at the meeting today, and the SBC president referenced Fern Creek's pastor during a news conference today.
Linda Papa made a passionate argument from the floor to suggest that there are no limitations based on sex for people being able to serve in any role in the church. And for them, I think what we would say is Southern Baptists and your church are in different places and seem also to be moving in different directions.
Now, Rick Warren said that the SBC is not moving toward unity. Rather, the evangelical conservative church, he said, voted for conformity and uniformity today, Gadi.
So the SBC didn't just vote to expel these two churches, right? Today they also voted to amend their constitution to ban women from leadership roles. Is this a done deal?
Yeah, it's not a done deal just yet, Gadi. A Virginia pastor actually led the effort to get the SBC Constitution amended to more directly say that only men can hold pastor and elder positions in churches in accordance with Scripture. It needed a 2/3 majority to pass. That motion met that threshold. There's still a second vote at next year's annual meeting that needs to happen for this measure to pass and become law. One of the scriptures cited in the effort here, Gadi, says essentially that women should not have authority over men, and this change would bring the convention more in line with those sorts of scriptures.
Okay, so going back to the year 2000, the SBC was pretty clear about the restrictions on women. I guess Scripture hasn't changed. This is definitely a change. Why is this so shocking?
Yeah, well, the SBC president said today that these moves may seem strange to non-Southern Baptists, but they're not really unfamiliar policy or doctrine to members of the church. One woman at the meeting today told the AP that it's time for the SBC to, quote, shut the door on feminism and liberalism. These moves may be the beginning of that. Gadi, we should note, too, that all of the churches in the SBC are fully independent churches. So as best we can tell, the expelled churches can continue to operate. They just won't be a part of the Southern Baptist Convention, and we'll see how many of them choose to try to stay in the Southern Baptist Convention. Gadi?
Aaron Gilchrist, thanks so much. And that does it for us tonight. I'm Gadi Schwartz. We're going to see you here tomorrow. But until then, stay tuned now.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.